Bonjour, Kinamagi and Ireland Indishnikas, and welcome to today's social studies lesson. Today's episode, the people of the American Southwest. We begin today's lesson within our Google Classroom under the social studies topic. And under today's chapter 2, lesson 2, day 1, date 9/22, you'll find the PDF for this lesson. It's only 2 pages long. It's the reading portion. I will be reading this portion at the end of this video. So if it's something that you'd rather just read on your own, you're welcome to do such, or you can listen to me read it. And I also tend to include little background information or further details. We also have our Google form. This is where the assessment will be. This helps me guide my teaching and your learning. So please make sure you do this and make sure you're doing them each and every session. This is kind of where we go based on. If I see that you're doing really well, or if I see you're struggling, we do adapt our teaching and learning. You'll also find 3 YouTube videos. They are from the Dene people, the Navajo, and they are all in the Dene language. So it's something I encourage you to check out. You are not assessed on them, but I do want you to actually listen to the language. We talk a lot in our social studies about history as if the Dene or the Ojibwe or the Haida are past tense. We're obviously here, and we are thriving communities with language and culture. So I want you to look at language, especially in modern media, so that you kind of start to understand, yes, we're talking about the past, but it's the present as well. While it's good to know about the role of regions in our social studies and how Native Americans adapted to it, it's also more important to understand that we're still here. So let's go to Google Earth. Zooming out a little bit, we see Turtle Island, North America. Here's Canada, the United States, Mexico, the Pacific Ocean, and way over here, the Atlantic Ocean, but that's irrelevant to this lesson today. We focused in our last set of episodes on the Pacific Northwest, stretching from Northern California, Oregon, Washington, the province of British Columbia, Canada, and Alaska. And you saw a lot of green when we looked in here. And we talked about there being a moderate temperature, but a lot of moisture, a lot of rain, because these storms come off the ocean, and then when they have to rise up to the mountains, they drop the rain. Well, now we're moving a little bit to the east and a lot to the south, and we're going to get into this region here. And you'll notice just by looking at this image that it's a lot more brown. That's going to suggest to us that there's obviously less trees. It's also a more arid region. We zoom in a little bit further. You can see that this includes Southern California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and this region would even go down in here into Sonora and into Mexico itself. But we're focusing in this set of lessons more towards this area, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. This is the current home of the Dene and the Hopi. And you'll hear a lot about pueblos in this region, and pueblo is actually the Spanish word for town. In some of the lessons, you may hear the phrase Anasazi. That's an old term that we are starting to do away with. We're going to use the term ancestral Puebloan, just to signify that the old word literally had meant the ancestors of our enemies, and that's not how they wanted to refer them anymore. So when we talk about the Puebloan culture, we're going to use that term, although in some media you're going to hear the old term. All right, moving into our reading today. We have the first people of North America, the Southwest American Indians. The guy guided inquiry questions. How did physical characteristics of place impact the lives of American Indian groups in various regions? And how was the culture of the Southwest American Indians influenced by the way people adapted to and used the climate and natural resources of the area? As you're reading, you may be thinking about how this region compares to the Pacific Northwest, but I also want you to be considering how this region compares to Michigan. Because in the end, I want you to be able to consider the compare and contrast all of these different regions with our region. So as we look at the chapter, you see a very tall mesa here. And then, and mesa is a word that means table. It's literally kind of a tall, flat kind of mountain. There are quite a few of them in the region. There are some additional resources here that you will be able to look at. Then some images of our Kachina dolls. We'll talk about them. So let's go back to the top here. The conditions of the Southwest. American Indians in the Southwest needed to be resourceful due to the climate and landscape of the region. One American Indian group from the Southwest are the Pueblo. Their name comes from the structures in which they lived among dry rock canyons in the present-day states of Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Texas. Pueblos were structures built for multiple family dwellings. These dwellings were made from adobe, a type of clay that is formed and hardened into bricks when dried in the sun. Compared to the people of the Pacific Northwest, people of the Southwest had very different resources available to them that could be used for food, clothing, and shelter. Adobe is a term that I do want you to know, and you will see it on computers, but you also should know it's a type of clay that is formed from clay that's literally sun-dried. Pueblo is also the Spanish word for town, but we also apply them to the buildings that they lived in this region. The region was hot and dry with few trees and plants and only a few rivers flowing throughout. Droughts or long periods of dry weather with very little precipitation were a real threat to this area. Because there wasn't much variety or abundance of plant life, there weren't many animals in the area either. Occasionally, there were wild turkeys, coyotes, rodents, and other small game, but meat was not readily available to eat, and the Southwest American Indians had to find alternate food sources. So they became farmers and grew what they needed. All right, so we now look here, long periods of dry weather. Droughts do happen in Michigan. These ones tend to be a little more significant. In fact, droughts are considered to be one of the potential causes of why the ancestors had left parts of this region 500 to 800 years ago. When it says very little precipitation, precipitation is rain, snow, hail, sleet. So we know it's really dry. You're not going to be able to grow some of the crops that we grow here. There's not as many rivers, which is going to be a difference between our region and the Pacific Northwest as well. And obviously they have some different game that live in the area. Do we have wild turkeys here? Yes, and coyotes, yes, but it's a little bit different. We see that farming is important to this region. Farming was not such a huge factor in the Pacific Northwest as in our last episode. Again, the Southwest American Indians needed to be resourceful. They used irrigation, which is a method of moving water to crops on dry land. Vocabulary word you need to know. They dug ditches to help transfer water and built reservoirs to catch water whenever it rained. This allowed them to grow crops like corn, beans, squash, melons, and others. Pottery made from the clay of the area and baskets made from grasses were used as storage containers. So you can see that there is some similarity to current day Michigan. Corn is a very plentiful crop. There's literally some growing outside my office door right here. Beans and squash, melons, those are things you'll find now in Michigan. They're very important to this region. corn was one of those crops that could be used to make all kinds of different things, and it was a big part of their diet. While pottery and baskets had functional purposes, they were also pieces of art. Along with pottery and baskets, Southwest American Indians made kachina dolls, pictured on the right and below, right here, which represented spirits that controlled many aspects of their world. They sang songs and performed dances to these spirits as part of their culture. You're encouraged to look further into that topic. Um, and then moving over here to the additional student activities. These links are things you can further look out. And it says find the region on a blank map like the one below. I've already been over to one. You can see this map here that appeared in the last lesson where we had the Pacific Northwest. We're again looking over here. I don't pay close attention to the names here because obviously Anasazi is an old term and we tend to refer to them in the very past tense, like going back to the 13th century kind of past tense, whereas the Navajo and Hopi are in this region today, right now. So once you go back and check out the assignment, always start with what is your name? Which color marks the Southwest region? If you've forgotten, go back and watch this lesson again. Then pueblos were made from concrete, planks, or adobe. What best describes the climate? Cool and humid, cool and dry, hot and dry, or hot and humid. The method of moving water to crops on dry land is known as irrigation, plumbing, cloud seeding, or dam building. Two items grown by people in the Southwest. That's two of the crops. They listed several, but you only need two. And what did kachina dolls represent? Make sure you submit your answer. Make sure you're keeping up with this work as we go through this set of lessons. I encourage you to look further into some of the things that you learn during this particular chapter. If you have questions, feel free to ask me or ask our culture staff, as they may have some connections and stories that they've heard throughout their travels. If you have any questions, please email me at mireland@sagchipschool.net, and I hope you all have a minute again. Bye-bye.